Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, December 10th, 2025, and I'm calling to order the CCC Common Council Executive Committee meeting. Karen, could you please call a roll?
President Figueroa Cole.
Here.
Vice President Duncan. Alder Govindarajan. Alder Conklin.
Present.
Alder Martinez Rutherford.
Present.
Alder Ugair. Present. Alder Harrington McKinney. Alder Curry. You have quorum.
Okay, it's going to be late, I think. Okay, thank you, Karen. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We had the draft from November 26. Are there any changes or comments on regards to the minutes? I see no hands. Do we need a motion for that? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please? I cannot hear you. Oh. Oh, you were on the last meeting? Alder, yeah, you do fine. John? is the
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second? There you go. Thank you. So do we have any public comment, Karen?
Approval?
Oh, is there any objection to recording a unanimous approval of the minutes? Mr. Duncan, you have a question?
You don't have to. No. I'm right. He doesn't have to.
What's going on?
I'm getting it finally. Finally getting the hang of this thing.
What's going on?
He went to abstain because he wasn't here, but you don't.
Oh, okay.
That's not,
All right, good.
luckily it's not a thing.
Okay, so no objections. We record unanimous votes of the minutes from 11:26.
We have no registrants.
We had no registrants for the public comment today, so we'll move to disclosures and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures and recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? I see no hands, so we'll move on to the items for consideration. The first item on the agenda requires a vote and is Legistar 85-947, Poet Laureate request, poetry recitation schedule for 2025 Common Council meetings. The dates provided are Tuesday, March 11, 2025, June 3rd, 2025, September 2nd, 2025, December 9, 2025. Could I please get a motion? Can I get a second?
Motion to approve. Second.
Got that? Okay, is there any discussions or questions on regards to agenda item 85-947? I don't see any hands raised. I take that as we're good to go. Is there can we record a unanimous vote for the adoption of these dates? Is there any reason not to record that? I don't see any hands up, so the motion carries. We move on to agenda item 386-387, the overview of the 50-piece rule and campaign restriction guidance. This is just an overview, so we don't need a vote.
Correct.
Attorney Haas, could you please take it over? Do you need to share your screen or something, or?
I'll share my screen.
Okay, perfect.
Kind of talk him through it and then he'll.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, let me share my screen. So everyone, I thought it would be nice to cover this. Let's see if I got this to work. Okay, looks right. Okay. I thought it would be nice for us to cover this in CCC since it ended up being rather hefty of a document. And I thought it would be helpful if we could just kind of walk through it so you have a bit of an orientation to it. And then if you have burning questions for Attorney Haas, he will be more than happy to answer them. And you have this on your desks, and the folks, the alders, will find them on their desks tonight when they come in tonight. It was also emailed to everyone before the 1st. So Yes, enjoy. So the first part, so basically, as you know, starting December 1st, anyone who hasn't put in their non-candidacy papers is bound by what's called the 50-piece rule, which means that you can only send out 49 or fewer substantially identical pieces of information between now and the April election season. If you file your non-candidacy papers, you are no longer bound by that. But the way that we handle this is because you can file, you have some time to think about whether you're filing and how you're filing. We just apply it across the board to be safe so that there's no problem. So, and this is for folks, again, running for reelection. And so what you're going to find here in this document, and I want to say thank you very much to our community engagement strategist who put together this document, and we worked with Attorney Haas and me, and so I'm very, very thankful for this. So it gives you kind of the overview. It talks a little bit about what happens if you violate it. So it's driven by complaints, and the alder bears responsibility for ensuring that you're adhering to guidance. So it's worth it for you to kind of learn about it more and to be able to think about it as you're planning. Now, I also have to say that our community engagement strategist is also equipped and ready to help you when you want to have an event during campaign season to make sure that you're not, a city event, I'm talking about an alder duty event, so that you can help work that through. So she is ready and equipped to help you think through this. Sorry, this is jumping around here. So I guess I'm not really going to walk through everything because it's quite a lengthy document. I think some of the key points are you can have an event during campaign season. The 50-piece rule doesn't restrict that, but you have to think very strategically about how you're going to promote that event. I would also recommend, we tend to take the approach that if you're having an event, we'd like you to think through, is it necessary? Can it wait until after campaign season? Could it be perceived as as kind of campaigning? We kind of ask you to do some of that reflection when you're thinking about events, but technically events aren't prohibited during this time. Now, there's a lot of information here about how to count the pieces, what counts as one piece, what things are off limits. And I guess we can, dig into that if you have questions and that sort of thing. Something to highlight for you is that we have a resolution that was passed a few years ago, where it exempts alder blog posts, so you're able to blog as usual, and we can send out information about alcohol license meetings and development proposals. And a part of the rationale, I believe, for that is that those continue to happen all year round, regardless of whether we're in elections or not. And it's this kind of city business that, kind of needs to be taken care of. So that rationale, or that resolution helps cover that. So you can take a look in depth at that resolution. And let's see. And just we have some reminders in here about what you're not allowed to do during campaign season with city resources, and you can't campaign using city resources or staff time, so everyone has to be cognizant and think about that, so that we aren't crossing that. And let me scroll. Oop, this is just jumping. I wish I had a touch screen. All right. So it has, again, this goes into a lot of details about how to count how to count our social media posts, how to count, what to do about news releases, which we are not, news releases aren't allowed at this time because they're not covered by the resolution, but press releases are. It talks a little bit about the difference between the two and how that works. And it also talks about flyers and the blogging, of course. And just a reminder that alders, you're not allowed to announce that you're running on your blog. You can announce that you're not running, but you can't announce that you're running. And that has to do, again, with using city resources for campaign purposes. So just, I know that can be a little confusing to folks who aren't as familiar with it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of details in here about wearing campaign apparel, about all the different tools we have access to. One thing that a lot of people don't really think much about probably, but just to flag it, is that direct access to your email list tool, which is in your blog portal, and it's a way for you to directly email all your subscribers. That is disabled for anybody who has not filed their non-candidacy papers, because there's no way to customize it to keep it less than 50. So I know it's not something that many of the alders use currently, but it's just part of the information here. And so I really recommend that everybody really carefully reads this through. It talks about what we can do for neighborhood meetings, engagement events outside of the neighborhood meeting structure, what we need from you in terms of communication with the office. And then it has what I think is actually quite valuable, and again, a shout out to our community engagement strategist for putting this together. She's basically looked back to all these emails and exchanges between Attorney Haas and our office over the last couple of years to try to figure out the nuance and tried to get it into one place. So we have this compendium of questions for you to enjoy. And so, for example, can staff and alders send their news to other alders, and how to count that? I mean, we have so many things here. I don't know how much time we have, but, how do you send a post? Do you send a postcard before? Can you, and the answer is if you get your postcards out before December 1st, you're okay, right? Of course, right now we're already well into this. Questions about how you use your blogs, what counts as identical content. Let's see, what happens if you really want to do a meeting during campaign season? Is that okay? It talks about what if we're having a collective event with a number of alders, and some of the alders are running and some of them are not. How we handle that, basically the short story is we handle it as if it's all under the 50-piece rule, but there are a couple of nuances about that it covers. And so then it defines the concept of campaigning, all kinds of things. So I recommend you take a really deep look, and I'm here, and Larissa, our community engagement strategist, is here, and of course Attorney Haas is here. I mean, generally you can reach out to any of us and we'll help you figure it out. But right now, who's here is Attorney Haas. So I recommend if you have any burning questions right now that we can let him clarify some things.
Thank you, Karen. So are there any questions for Attorney Haas or Karen? Are there, Gary?
It's kind of the season for neighborhood annual meetings. Alders get invited to annual meetings. If there were questions about the campaign or so forth that come up from the neighborhood participants in such a meeting, are there limitations on what the alder can respond to?
You're talking about neighborhood meetings that are sponsored by the neighborhood organization?
Yes.
Right. No, there are no limitations because it would not be use of city resources.
Okay. Thank you.
If it were a city meeting and somebody, or, a neighborhood meeting, for instance, related to a development, and somebody in the audience asks you about campaigning or your campaign, I think the appropriate response would be, this is not the proper forum for that. I can talk to you after the meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Karen, can you share your screen real quick? So that, I took that document and went over it with Karen, Larissa, and Has. And then I created a spreadsheet that I can make available to you guys. It contains a sample on how to keep track of your blogs. When IT removed the mailing list, it removes the log of all the things that you send out, so you won't be able to see. You can always go to your website and keep track of that. But every time you hit send or resend, that counts as a one key. So this has examples there. There's a VLOOKUP table that once you make a selection based on the file that Karen put together, I wrote a line for each of those. So if you grab you can see a list of the things that were covered on the document. So it's like a summary of the document, and then once you select that, it tells you how many pieces that equates, and you can just add the number and keep track as you go along. So if you're interested, I can definitely share this with you guys to keep track of it. Like, so I have like mine going. I have a couple of blogs already out, and I have, a count of 2, and a third one that I'm working on. I'll share that later, and that's all I have for this particular item. I don't see any other questions on the queue, so this is an informational item only. That means that we can move to item 4. Let's just start 72568, boards, commissions, and committees structure. And for that, we have Christy, I think, right there, yeah? Christy on the Zoom to give us an update.
Thank you. And Isaac Matthias here is going to
And Isaac.
be involved as well. Let me share my screen really quickly. And you can see that PowerPoint slide deck. Okay, great. Well,
Christy,
thank you very much.
I'm afraid, Deputy Mayor Baumel, I'm afraid that we can't hear you quite much. I don't know if it's your audio. Maybe on Zoom, it looks like the people on Zoom are good, but out here, I'm not sure. We're trying to figure it out. Media team, if you can see if it's something going on our end that we can hear you, but very quietly.
People in Zoom can hear me okay? Kind of. Okay, not very,
Yes.
not very well. I don't know if I can let me try turning up.
Or putting my microphone closer.
That's better.
Is that better? It's
Yes.
not giving me a quick option to turn up my microphone. I'll see if I can keep that close. Just to stand with my headphones. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. We are admittedly long overdue to return to this committee and talk more about the work we've been doing at CCDC's request to try to streamline our BCC system a little bit. So I want to share our progress and what we propose as a body of work and some next steps for your consideration. And because we haven't been here in a little while, I'm going to do a little bit of a review as well. And then Isaac and I will both kind of show what we've come to from this. So, there we go. So just as a reminder, this work has been happening for a while, and it initially came out of a report that was received in 2019 from the Task Force on Government Structure, or TFOGS, which you might hear me accidentally refer to. They did a body of work to look at a number of things, one of which was our committee system, and we found a number of things that they thought needed improvement. Some was related to geographic and racial diversity, or the fact that we were lacking that. Some of the number of BCCs, boards, committees, and commissions, they found to be a drain on resident staff and all their time. They found that our committees lacked consistent accountability. It varied in their level of authority and influence. Some lacked a defined purpose or outlived their purpose or had overlapping purposes. And they also recognized that these were sometimes filling in as a proxy for community engagement, and yet the processes required Robert's rules, getting up and speaking into the microphone, or they just didn't really facilitate resident participation. And then often staff didn't have, there wasn't enough staffing and resources to really fulfill the work they were trying to do. So they recommended that we make some changes to the BCC, including some structural changes, but also just to the number. So we've been taking the work on from there, and it's taken a few forms from there. Thoughts of completely restructuring and starting over. We talked earlier, maybe a year ago, about rather than completely starting over, just honing in on what we've got and looking at where we could make some improvements with the goals of essentially saying the size and the functions of our BCC system should enable adequate staffing for committees so that all committees can be high functioning. So in other words, we can't spread ourselves too thin. Otherwise, we can't really meet the needs of all. It should enable a clear and efficient path for residents to engage in the legislative process. If there's something they're interested in following, is there one place they need to show up? 2 places? 7 places? So, part of that is just how we refer legislation and to how many places. It should enable efficiency in city processes and decision-making. That's a little related to the referral process as well. And it should reinforce our values that BCCs are not a substitute for equitable community engagement. They have their place, they have their purpose, they have their function, but we cannot accidentally treat them like our forum for engagement, because you're hearing from a small body of people that's either been appointed to or feels comfortable speaking into a microphone in a recorded public meeting, and that's a sliver of the community. So what do we hope to achieve by reducing the number of goals? So if we have all of these goals that are really around function, why do we think we have to reduce the sheer number to get at function? Part of this, I don't mean to be too repetitive, but efficient operations. So let's focus in on where we allocate our staff time, our alder time, and our legislative referrals. Enable more engagement. So free up alder time. I know a number of alders spend several nights a week in committee meetings that when they got elected, they probably envisioned spending in their constituents. So free up time to pursue those other modes of more equitable engagement and more robust engagement. Clarity for residents, as I said, following legislation can be confusing to figure out where it's most important to be. And then having strong accountable committees. So staff are better able to support the committees with better member onboarding, developing work programs, training, facilitation assistance, if there's fewer to let them really make sure they dot all of their I's. So just as a reminder of, again, why are we honing in on the number at this point? It won't be the only thing we propose, but why are we honing in right now? This is an analysis that was done as part of that TFOG's report, Task Force on Government Structure. So it's a little dated. This is from 2019. But at that time, they tried to compare Madison to other cities in a few ways. So they looked at how Big 10 cities compared to each other. What about cities that are both capital and university cities? What about just Wisconsin cities? We have our own set of legislative laws from the state that we have to follow that might be different than other Big 10 cities, for example. And you see here, there's a range, how many boards, committees, and commissions did various cities we looked at have. You see there's a range at the low end, 11, and at the high end, 77, but an average of around 30, 25 to 35. At that time, the city of Madison had 102. Today, we have a few less. We have 74. 13 are required by the state, but the remainder are our choice. So we've made some progress, and I can show that a little here. So just the last bit of timeline history here. We started with this work being recommended by a task force in government structure. A council ad hoc committee was formed to try to implement the TFOG's recommendations. That work went forward from 2020 to about 2023. And then with the current council, it moved into being addressed through CCBC with largely direction to council and mayor's office staff of how to work with agencies, how to work with with others to form these recommendations. I'm going to turn it over to Isaac in a second to talk about some of the things we did, but I just first want to note that along the way, there were a lot of conversations and things identified that said maybe this is something that's a candidate to pursue a change. And in a lot of cases, there was no push for anybody to wait and push this all forward as one bundle. If somebody had a need to make a change or a desire to make a change on a different timeline, that just went forward. So I just note a number of things over on the right-hand slide that have happened along the way. So the work has been trickling in, and we're now going to propose a number of additional items. So Isaac, can I hand it to you for a little bit of what we looked at?
Yeah, and so kind of going through some of the analysis that we've done over the past couple of years as it's been handed off to CCEC, some of which you may be familiar with, some of which you might not be. And so there's been a lot of data review and synthesis we've done. Christy talked about some of the TFOG's work, whether it be the comparisons to other cities that were done, you were just shown. There were TFOG surveys of council members, staff members, and residents who serve on committees. We have looked at the performance data on individual BCCs. So we kind of looked at each individual BCC, looked at the total members that they have, the number of meetings that they held, the meetings that they canceled over the years, and the number of items that were referred to see kind of how they're functioning, how often they're being utilized. And this was information that was presented to CCEC about a year and a half ago. We've also additionally did different ways to sort BCCs. One way that we looked at was 7 elements of a great city. There's a chart on the right side of the screen here. There's these 7 different elements, whether it be neighborhoods and housing, land use and transportation, health and safety, green and resilient, effective government, economy and opportunity, culture and character. While it can be a bit subjective, we kind of put our brains together and put these different BCCs into these different categories to see where there can be overlap between them, and see if that can aid us in making any reductions or combinations or things like that. Similarly, we looked at the Madison General Ordinances, whether it be looking at the members that were outlined in the MGOs, seeing if there's any BCCs that were particularly unique in the ways that they have membership or different requirements and different overlaps. We also looked at the outlined purposes or duties, which really show what these BCCs, according to the ordinance, should be working on, and seeing where there's overlap and possibilities for combinations. You can go to the next slide. We've additionally reached out to alders. We've talked to almost all alders in one form or another. We requested written feedback from alders on BCCs served on, whether it be the ones currently or in the past. A number of you submitted these spreadsheets back to us after we sent it out to you. We've also held meetings with different alders, whether related to those spreadsheets or otherwise. We know that there have been past alder proposals about BCCs, and those were taken into account, and we've been to CCEC multiple times now, and we've had these conversations. So we kind of have a general idea on what alders kind of all across the board are thinking on this. We've additionally talked to agencies and city staff. So we've gotten their input on optimizing BCCs, and also agency comparisons of kind of their priority needs and the relation to the current structure. And so kind of through all those is how we've gotten to the point we are today. So handing it back to Deputy Mayor Baumel.
So there's kind of 2 things that came out of that. One are some trends and themes that are kind of broad-based and apply to all BCCs, and they lead to a body of work. And then there's some individual BCCs that'll come up on next slides. So one, we have some existing guidance on how you define, establish, or sunset a BCC. There's some thought about strengthening that. There seem to be, right now it seems fairly steady, but there have been times where a number of new ones are created, and that can put a strain on staffing, and sometimes people create one people think, well, there's another way we could have done this, or you created one that actually is very similar in scope or purpose to one that already exists. And sometimes those things come up, or this felt like something that could have had any time limited to deal with a particular problem, not live forever. So they want to look at that guidance and really make sure it's as strong as we'd like it to be. There was a push for clear annual work programs for committees who don't receive a lot of referrals. So take something like the Plan Commission. They are almost exclusively dealing with legislation that's referred to them related to development proposals or plan proposals. But there are others that have more of a proactive defined work program between the committee and staff, and spelling those out through the year so that it's not just to make sure they have strong, robust bodies of work that everybody's aligned on and on board with and understands. There was support for additional training for staff, chairs, vice chairs, stronger onboarding, making sure that we have, that chairs know how to facilitate and vice chairs. Staff can help orient new members to the work so that they have an understanding of where they're coming into something and what the expectations are. And just making sure that we have enough time to do that with the committees on the side. We have hundreds of committees, and they sometimes change every 2 years. So it's not a small job, but we do want to build that infrastructure and system for strengthening that. There's some interest that has come out of some of our former CCEC discussions and also from other alders about a lower number of committees per alder. And that could be by number of committees that have an alder, maximum number of alders per committee. There's ways to think about that. Some suggestions to review membership composition. So sometimes special expertise comes into play. Sometimes we have a committee that needs expertise and has it. Sometimes we have a committee that needs expertise and doesn't have it. So there's a desire to review that. When it comes to individual BCCs, I want to say that many of them people feel are working very well. So I don't want to neglect to make that. But there were a handful of others where people felt like maybe the need has changed since they were established, or maybe the work is limited. And that might be an indicator that that's a committee that we just don't need, or it's not as high on our priority list. So we could look to do that work in a different way and potentially eliminate that committee. There were others with overlapping scopes, some of which also don't have full agendas. So you could think about how to make a combination without overwhelming their agendas and also just playing on the synergy between the topics that they currently focus on. And then there are a handful of others where they're like, well, we would just propose to do this thing a little differently. And so it's not really about whether, what the name of the committee is or how many there are. And I'll just explain that a little bit more. Our hope is to parse this out into a couple of steps. So when it comes to those individual BCC changes that I'm about to walk through one by one, we propose to start moving on those and pursue those now. We would like to start taking these proposals to the committees themselves in January. We would like to come back to you with an ordinance shortly thereafter. And I'll talk more about that, but we propose to just start moving on. And after, or perhaps starting at the same time, but likely just capacity-wise, after, we would like to really start focusing in on those additional kind of overarching changes about the standards, the training, and we just want to note that simultaneously there is work going on in 2025 to improve training on BCCs and to improve citywide engagement. So those aren't things that we, are trying to set aside. So for actual changes proposed, there's a few we're proposing to combine. On the left, there's community services, or a new community resources committee would be proposed. I'll go through all these in more detail. A new business resources committee would propose, and a number of award processes that could exist in one committee in civil rights. proposing to eliminate in the middle, we have a conference committee in CBD, that, a public safety review committee and downtown coordinating committee. And then other changes we're looking at, we're exploring moving, we're trying to coordinate with UW about, the best, home and size of the joint campus area planning committee. Right now, in terms of a tree board that lives in parks, we're proposing moving that to the Board of Public Works. And we're looking at, and working with a number of other committees to explore, other kind of partnership committees with other entities to explore whether any changes make sense. Hopefully we'll have more. So to go through I'm going to go through these in a little more detail. So, related to the topic of community development, we have a community services committee, a committee on aging, and an early childhood education committee that we're proposing to combine into a new community resources committee. There are very similar missions and intentions and functions within each of those three, such as like making decisions on funding awards. Moreover, they're often making decisions on funding awards to the same organizations. So the members are all kind of trying to like be understanding of the same community organizations and the roles they play in our community. Some of these struggle to have agenda items year round, so they certainly feel like there's capacity to have them collectively approached on the same committee agendas. And it would allow for more streamlined staffing and essentially less segmenting of populations that the same staff are working on with the same organizations. So that's the proposal there. They also have a community development division conference committee. This once oversaw a funding pool that no longer exists. And it was also intended as a place to reconcile decisions between different committees, but it just hasn't been needed. So it hasn't played that. I'm happy to take questions. I think I'll take questions at the end to make sure we don't go too deep into anyone and keep you here all night. In economic development, we're proposing to combine the vending oversight committee and the economic development committee into a business resources committee. This is a way to streamline staffing between the two, but moreover, it enables and ensures that each of those committees is looking at the full range of business resources, from very small to the larger. This can make sure that the folks who currently would be members of economic development kind of hold the perspective of somebody who's like vending on the street, very small business, and it also allows for somebody who's thinking about vending on the street to, also think about the relation of that with the storefronts that they're along. And so I think it's just a more holistic perspective on the spectrum. This happens to be a time where I think there's capacity. There's capacity to have both of those functions happen in one committee without overwhelming their agendas. But this may be coming at a time that's kind of a peak for both. So it could be something where we have to work through a timeline. It could be something related to like the late implementation or something like that. So I just wanted to note that. In planning, we're proposing eliminating the downtown coordinating committee and transferring the responsibility. One of their responsibilities is to hold a public hearing on the mall maintenance charges. So that hearing would have to be elsewhere. I think any of our charges that are approved by council would go to finance or to council. So I think there are other avenues for that hearing. But a lot of their purpose relates to input on downtown urban design and placemaking. Design, placemaking, art have a number of committees. Downtown issues have a number of committees. So, and it lists some of them here on the slide, whether it's art, then oversight plan, urban design landmarks, DMI, the bid. There's a lot of focus here. And in addition, sometimes we struggle to identify agenda items or that are consistent with their scope. So that's a proposal there. And then finally, coordinating with a joint campus area from the committee. This is a committee that people see value in, but the work is really focused on UW projects. It's a way for UW to share information about what the next steps are in implementing their master plan with neighboring community associations and with the jurisdictions of Madison and Shoreline. It's also, they sometimes also make recommendations to the UW's design review board. So we would like to talk to the UW about whether this should be a city committee or whether it should be a university committee. And that's a conversation that does still need to happen. Alder Evans?
I'll wait until you're done. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
And I'm going to pause for a moment because I heard myself say this is a committee that we do think has value. I want to pause and say we feel that way about all of these. So some of this comes from, like, when we go to CDD, for example, I want to recognize this group has 8 committees that they staff. Planning has 7 committees that they staff. So a lot of this is just realizing that we value our committees in so many ways that we end up having a very large number of them. So we're just really trying to hone in and make sure we prioritize what we think is the most important place for us to be using the committee structure to meet the need that we have. In public safety, we're proposing eliminating the Public Safety Review Committee as something where we see it overlapping quite a bit with other ways we pursue public safety. We know there's a lot of presentations and briefings that are similar between PSRC and the Police Civilian Oversight Board. We know that full council is interested in MPD reports. There's some overlap in violence prevention with Board of Health. We do see the council having a recent history of taking up public safety at full council meetings or through a special task force or ad hoc committee like the body worn cameras, for example. In addition, we see they struggle with quorum. They sometimes struggle to identify agenda items. So that's our proposal there. And then in civil rights, there are 3 different bodies essentially that propose various awards within civil rights. We have the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award Committee, the Equal Opportunity Commission as part of their work awards the James C. Wright Award, and then staff developed the Alex Olson Award, Stageo Award, which is seeking tolerance and justice. That stands for. They think that there's capacity and potential to combine those into a single awards committee. It's something we'd like to discuss with them more. I know that some of those discussions have been scheduled, but it's essentially a way to streamline so that one body is being staffed and it's more coordinated and they can work more on this. In public works, there's a proposal like you might to move the tree board function. So we don't have anything called a tree board, but we have a requirement from this. One of the required state committees or functions is a tree board function. The Urban Forestry Division used to be housed in parks. We moved it from parks to streets a few years back in 2020. And the tree board function did not move at the same time. It's in a park subcommittee. It's in the Habitat Stewardship Committee. And when we talk to our urban foresters, they do much more work in the right of way. And the people they need to coordinate with are engineering, traffic engineering, stormwater, sewer, water utility, the other folks in the right of way, planning. And those all are coordinated through the Board of Public Works. So they certainly would want to go to parks whenever they're doing any tree work in the parks. But most of the work they do is not in parks, and the type of things they need their committee to give input on are not the things that are really in the purview of the Habitat Stewardship. Okay. So there is a proposal to move this to the Board of Public Works. So in total, we're looking at, I think, you remember my earlier slide that talked about 8 committees that have already pursued changes in recent years, and there's about maybe 8 to 10 more that would be pursued through this in total. And our proposal for really what to do is we're here discussing this with you today. We would like to, in January, go to all of these committees and talk to them about it. And say, if this were to change, not the question, to be clear, we don't want to go to each committee and say, what do you think? Should we make this change or should we not? Because no single committee is equipped to answer the question of how to optimize the citywide BCC system. That's not their lens. That's not their purview. But they do know their own work. And so we can ask them questions more focus on what's the most important things to make sure we get right? What's the most important things to hold in? Is it a particular topic that needs attention? Is it a particular approval authority? Is it something about the membership of a new committee function or structure? What matters? And what do we need to know from them? We would then come back to CCEC for some additional direction, summary of that, a report of what we've been finding. We've been tentatively put on a schedule. As you're aware, council meetings have had some informational presentations at them. We're tentatively holding January 28th for a full council presentation on this topic. Based on all of the feedback from that, we're hopeful that we could introduce a proposed ordinance as soon as February, which would allow adoption or action from the council in March. It could be referred back to all of those committees again. Again, I think the yes/no question, should you do this, should you not, is not one when we're looking at an entire city structure that they're most equipped to answer, but it's certainly possible. So that was factored in as well. And I think that is the last slide. So I'll grab this.
Thank you, Christy. And thank you for a wonderful presentation and very thorough. And it feels good that we're making positive steps forward. I'm glad that we're down from 102 to something in the 70s. I would hope that we would get down from something in the 70s to something in the 30s or 40s within a reasonable, next 3 or 4 years. Regarding the Joint Campus Area Committee, I sit on that committee, and you're right, there is very little that can be that an alder needs to do in being on this committee, because the recommendations are really it's all about UW, and it's just not appropriate in my mind that city staff, that we have planning staff organizing and staffing this meeting. It's just a misallocation of scarce resources in my mind. So I'm glad to see that made the list. Similarly, what used to be called the Education Committee, but the City County Schools Collaboration Committee is advisory entirely, but it's staffed by the city. And it really should be staffed by MMSD. We shouldn't have city staff, paid staff, coordinating a committee that serves broadly the interests of MMSD and helps county representatives and city representatives, elected officials and staff know what are the salient issues at the school district with respect to the outside issues, the issues outside the classroom that impact performance in the classroom. Now, I'm even thinking some of that could be done on a staff level. But having sat on this committee now for nearly 6 years, very little gets done. And I think only one policy change went forward in those 6 years. in terms of anything productive that we can point to. A lot of talk, a lot of good talk at times, but nothing that is particularly useful. And again, if we're looking at things that the changes that we can make that would minimize the expenditure of scarce staff resources, we ought to look at those committees where nothing really comes out of them, where nothing gets accomplished, where ordinances don't change, where proposals don't come forward, where policy doesn't change, where people's lives aren't changed. And if that's not happening, let's get rid of it. I appreciate the direction, but I encourage even a sharper scalpel, so to speak, and making even deeper cuts in our BCCs. And so please consider reorganizing what used to be called the Education Committee into something that the school district would take full responsibility for and no longer requiring 2 to 3 city staff members to coordinate. Thanks.
We can look at that.
Thank you, Christy, for the presentation. Are there any other questions for Christy at this moment? I know some of you were looking forward to this presentation and were asking. So now is your time. I mean, you can talk to her anytime, but if you have any questions for the to create more discussion, I really appreciate it. Here he goes. Okay, Alde Govindrajan, please go ahead.
Thank you. I actually don't have any questions yet. I'm sure I will have tons, but I really appreciate the work that has gone into this. I hope that I'm looking forward to where the committees are with discussions going forward in January. But thank you, Christy. I will email you tons of questions later, I'm sure.
Please do. And let me say a couple more words about finer grain. So if we're going to go to these committees in January, we think it makes sense to provide them with info. We're hoping we can write a memo and send it to them in advance in December, so they know what we would like to ask them. They understand why. We'll certainly begin with the presentation when we're there, but I think it would be very useful if they have time to ponder in advance and are ready to really dig into the topic in January. So this presentation here today is the first public listing of our proposal. We didn't really want to go further with it unless we knew we were aligned with what you were expected, or whether if there's anything here that gave you heartburn. So we would like to put out more information about this and quickly so that people can start understanding it. Sharing it publicly, sharing it with those committees, reaching out more with alders, particularly who serve on those committees, and going further. So if there's a way you would like more information yourself to share, by all means, reach out. We'd be happy to get you wherever you can. Talk to your fellow alders. Everything we mention is going to be a committee that somebody's going to disagree with everything on this list, I would guess, right? I don't know, but I would guess, because there's a lot of good work that happens, and we're just trying to hone in and prioritize with our limited staff resources and our limited alder capacity to be everywhere doing all the things. And we, I think, are trying to focus in on those higher goals, those goals that I had at the beginning of the presentation. I do think that there's probably potential to look beyond these, but we just wanted to start with these. So I think reorienting people that it's not that it's this committee, it's that we have to look at it within the scope of all of the committees, and this is what we propose. There could be other proposals, all that I just gave one. There could be different opinions, but that is the goal. It's not a goal intended to really attack any particular thing. And so I think we're going to need help with all of our, with all of our decision making in the community and the public and those communities on that. So I'm happy to give anybody any information that might help.
Thank you, Christy. Alder Ugary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Christy, for that presentation. I just wanted to say that really, I thought there was great logic behind all of those proposals. Certainly see the opportunity there to better use staff time. I've got plenty of ideas for other things that I'd like to get from staff, so certainly like some time to be freed up. I particularly think that the opportunities that you've looked at to combine the whole planning department big stretch that they have across so many committees makes a lot of sense. But thank you again. I look forward to getting that presentation.
Thank you, Alder. With no other hands on the queue, Christy and Isaac, thank you so much for putting this together. Great presentation. I'm looking forward to get this process moving on the new year. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are moving to agenda item 5A3516, the committee updates. So if there are any updates, I don't have any updates today, but if you guys have any, please raise your hand. Alder Gary?
Yes, I was corresponding this afternoon after I got an email from MPD West District Captain Beckett about her transfer, and that led us into some discussion on a problem that's existed for over a year in the use of their resources, attending to one minor item, a tiny home that's been moving up and down Longmeadow Street. We really didn't see a way to go forward with some initial work on potential ordinance changes that was done by my predecessor. And looking at those, I don't think they would have actually made a difference in actually achieving a change. So I had asked, and then just for a broader look, had help from zoning and from MPD and streets about other approaches we could take. They recently, actually just before we went to referendum, with a variety of possibilities to consider. And I think what makes sense is, because I hate to inflict on council or on CCEC, require a lot of time to look at one problem on one street in one district. But I think there may be some things in this list of possibilities that might have relevance to other districts. And I thought what I might do first is distribute that list from staff to CCEC, which has a broad enough geographic situation here that maybe we can see if there's something there that makes sense to pursue.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at the information. Thank you. With that said, then I don't see any hands on the queue. Item 6, 81382, council office updates. Karen has one very important update.
I will show my screen. Yeah, so the big update is I'm going on vacation out of the country for 2 weeks, and I don't think I've ever been so in need of a vacation as I feel right now. So y'all, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be gone for 2 weeks. There's also a lot of other people's vacations, and that's listed here. This is pretty short. I just wanted to, give you a couple reminders. Again, the 50-piece rule. I've noticed I've gotten a lot of constituent mail in my spam quarantine folder. So I'm just flagging this again for folks, how to check your spam quarantine folder. I recommend it, and we do check it. So we check it to catch anything that comes in there that should be attached in Legistar, et cetera. So the council office is working on starting work on an annual report, given everybody's holiday schedules. It will be likely to come out in late January or so. I think that Larissa did a great job on the format, so I'd really like to give it another try with this year. So you'll be receiving that from us. I'm very proud of all the work that the office has done this year. And then you just got an update about the BCC process, so that's good. And of course, Alder onboarding is, as I mentioned last time, is on my radar. So you will be getting more details as I figure some things out and as we work out the nuance. So that is all. I wanted to keep it short, but yes, I'm very excited to be taking a whole 2 weeks. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how this all goes. Yeah, I know. I'm going to miss you all, but I'm going to try really hard to not think about you. Thank you all so much.
Okay. So, what time is it? 5:32. Okay. So, thank you. The next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Gary already shared some. If there's any additional items that you would like to be considered, you can bring them up now or send an email to Karen and we'll discuss it and figure out where to add them. I don't see any hands. With that, I think we'll come to the end of our agenda. So I will take a motion to adjourn. A second by MGR. And can is there an objection on recording unanimous vote for adjournment? I don't see any hands objecting, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.